Joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, Office of Management and Budget Director. So, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Stuart, thanks for having me. It's a lovely day here in Washington, D.C. I hope it's nice in New York.
It's not raining in the background. Those are sprinklers. I know that. Okay.
I keep hoping they're going to splash me during the interview and help me stop sweating.
I've told them to turn it off. Okay. Janet Yellen says we're not going to get to 3% growth anytime in the next 5 years. How do you respond to that, sir?
That she can be wrong, and that if we get a chance to do what we laid out yesterday in the Wall Street Journal op-ed, introducing Maganomics, Make America Great Economics, if we get a chance to put those policies in place, that comprehensive package of proposals that the White House is coming up with, we do have a chance to get back to 3% growth.
So it really is all about cutting taxes, cutting red tape, just getting on with it. That's what it's all about, right?
Well, it's everything. It's tax cuts, it's tax reform, it's reducing regulation, it's energy policy that unleashes those natural resources, it's welfare reform that encourages people to get back to work and back into the workforce, it's spending restraint, it's trade policies, it's everything that we do. We wanted to come up with something that sort of encapsulated everything the president, when the president says, make America great again, what does that translate into in terms of a package of legislative proposals, a package of administrative proposals, things that we can do without Congress. And that's where we came up with Maganomics, and that's what we're trying to just point out to people. Look, you have to do these things to get to 3% growth, and you absolutely, positively must get back to 3% growth.
But the key to the whole ball of wax is surely cutting taxes for individuals and for businesses.
Yeah,
and the Republicans appear to be obstructing that at this point.
I spent some time on the Hill yesterday. I won't go as far as say obstruction. We can have a long discussion about what obstruction is, and mostly it means what the Senate Democrats are doing on all of our proposals, including all of our nominations. But I was on the Hill yesterday trying to point out to leadership and rank and file alike that we must have a budget out of the House and the Senate in order to get tax reform. If you don't have that, you don't get this magic tool called reconciliation, and you have to go ask the Democrats for help in the Senate. You have to have 60 votes in the Senate, and clearly the end result of that would be a watered-down tax proposal, and a watered-down tax proposal does not get us to 3%. But don't just focus, please, Stuart, on the tax proposals, because the regulatory component here is huge. The energy component is extremely large, so it's everything that gets us to 3%. But you're right, we have to have every single piece of that, and it starts with tax reform.
The Congressional Budget Office says this budget not going to balance in 10 years. Your response?
Well, we expected that because, again, what are they assuming? They are assuming the new normal when it comes to economic growth. You drill down into their numbers, as we did last night and this morning, and they assume 1.9% GDP growth forever. And we reject that. You can't have that. If you assume that, you might as well give up and go home. The country cannot survive on 1.9% growth forever. We have to get above that. It doesn't surprise me that the CBO came out with that conclusion, because their assumptions are entirely different than ours, and we think they're entirely flawed.
I know that you've been asked, what about people who are dropped from the food stamp program or dropped from Medicare? What about those people? How do you respond to that?
That if you take a look at the numbers of folks who are on Medicaid, the folks who are on food stamps, what you've seen is a dramatic increase at the beginning of the recession, which you would expect, but we've not seen a dramatic decrease now that we're back at what some economists consider full employment. So it leads us to believe that you can have a conversation, and should have a conversation, about whether or not there's people on those programs who should be working. And one of the things we've been pushing in health care, in our tax proposals, in our budget proposals, is having a work requirement for those benefits, making those folks who can, single people with no dependents who are able-bodied, it is reasonable, we think, to ask them to actually go back to work, and that's what we're trying to do. That adds to the labor force, adds to productivity, adds to GDP growth. It's all part and parcel of Maganomics.
You were a member of the Freedom Caucus when you were in Congress. How do you feel about whipping your former fellow travelers into line with health care reform and tax cuts?
Yeah, I know most of my fellow travelers, and whipping them into line is not something we ever did very well. I know that I couldn't whip myself when I was over there, that's for sure. Mark Meadows called me last night after he saw that headline and said, are you going to whip me on the budget? And I said, no, and apparently the publication that put out that headline changed it after that. But yes, I have been on the Hill trying to remind rank and file, Freedom Caucus, Tuesday Group, anybody who would listen, that we absolutely have to have a budget pass out of the House and pass out of the Senate in order to get tax reform. So I recognize that there's going to be infighting in the House and the Senate over details in the budget. That's fine. That's part and parcel of the process. As long as they know that at the end of this process, we must have a budget. That was the message I'm delivering yesterday, and that I'll continue to deliver until we do have a budget.
You've got a lot to get done, but Mick Mulvaney, Budget Director, thanks for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.